Good morning, Professor Lucy. Today I'm going to do my presentation on my GSEN5383 project titled Texas Gulf Coast Mock Oil Spill, an analysis of the correlation between the distribution of offshore pipelines and susceptible coastal environments. The point of my project was to display how a theoretical pipeline or platform, oil or natural gas spill, could affect the different coastal environments along the Gulf Coast of Texas. Doing so will show how both a spill from a distribution point, aka these pipelines, and a spill from a source would cause different impacts on the coastal environments, and to show what sensitivities these environments have to assess which areas need to have priority during a cleanup response. Start off with talk about the pipeline problems that exist in the Gulf of Mexico. From personal experience, I worked with a hydrographic surveying company for about 2 years, and I saw firsthand a lot of these uncovered and displaced and damaged and perverse pipelines that have been raised from the sandy tundra of the Gulf of Mexico, either from a hurricane or a anchors dragged along them, or just over time the sand has shifted and uncovered these pipelines, and many of them are bent and damaged and old. As you can see here, kind of as a simple example, if a hurricane came in and bent these pipelines, obviously the materials and casings that are holding these pipelines aren't meant to bend in some of these ways and aren't supposed to rise above the sea floor like this. As you can see in the side scan data, the shadow, you can use an algorithm to measure the shadow, and it's actually the distance this pipeline is arcing over the sea floor based on the shadow is measured off here to the right. So obviously many of these pipelines are placed under stress and are becoming damaged and can easily leak oil from them, and it's just a matter of time before some of these pipelines start imploding based on the poor care these oil and gas companies are taking care of these pipelines. So data used or created for my project are the pipeline networks, a shapefile of Texas, 4 mock oil spill sites that I created, ESI ranking data, which I'll go over that here in a minute, that I obtained from NOAA's website, and then specific environmental focuses that I created and discovered based on some spatial analysis that I did. I'll talk about that later on in this presentation. So first of all, just to kind of show you what some of this data looks like, these are the pipeline line shapefile, just a little piece of it off the Gulf Coast, or off the coast of Texas, just showing some of these networks that exist, some of these pipelines that exist off the coast. Here's the ESI ranking data I was talking to you about. It's the Environmental Sustainability Index. This index has been created by NOAA, showing how susceptible these environments are to damage by oil if a oil spill were to happen. So in this ranking, you're given not only numerical but alphabetical ranking from 1 to 10, with lower numbers being areas that are less susceptible to damage by oiling, like a rocky shore or man-made structures or cliffs or kind of bedrock, ranging all the way down to higher numbers like 8s, 9s, and 10s that are more likely to experience damage by oiling. So we're talking vegetated areas, marshes, swamps, wetlands, mangroves, just areas that would absorb the oil and would be very hard for these areas to be cleaned up. So kind of going to be focusing on areas like this along the coast throughout my project, because these areas would be most affected in event of a oil spill. So then I created these 4 mock oil spill points, basically taking a couple things into consideration when I created these 4 points. First and foremost being areas where these pipeline networks overlapped, and there seemed to be a lot of them jumbled in place, which means there's a little more commotion happening there, a little more traffic in those areas, and I would just from experience and kind of just line of thought, these areas probably have a better chance of having an oil spill happening. And I also secondly took into consideration kind of close to areas that people can have personal connections with. So I've got Corpus Christi Bay, Matagorda Bay, and there's a very large wildlife refuge here off this shore right here, and then obviously Houston Ship Channel. So these are 4 mock oil spill points that I'm going to be using to simulate the oil spill. And so this is just kind of a combination of all the data I'll be using. They see many colors symbolized from the ESI ranking data, just very generic single proportional symbol, not proportional symbol, a ranking symbol, and then my oil spill points, and then platform locations, which I just used to just visualize these platform densities off the coast of Texas. Okay, so these are the methods and processes I use to display and analyze this data. So first of all, I'll talk about some of the problems I ran into when trying to use this data for analysis. This ESI ranking data was all not only numerical, but also numerical and alphabetical for all the ranks. So as you can see in this table, all these areas have ESI ranking, and only a couple of them are only numerical, and so I needed to go through and make them all numerical, and so I went through and manually created a re-ranking of this data with the most important areas, like the high numbers like 10 as first priority, 9s were second priority, 8s third, and so on and so forth, to where when I got down to 1s, 2s, and 3s, areas less susceptible to environmental impact by an oil spill, they had ranks of 9s and 10s. But so I'm going to be focusing on, now that I've re-ranked it, areas that are 1s, 2s, and 3s. And then I also had to go through and do my oil spill locations for my analysis, or for the work that I was doing, because for some reason when they were in decimal degrees, I could not get anything to work, but when I converted the oil spill points to meters, it seemed to work. So that was the first couple things I did. And then to display these oil spills, I've got my 4 locations here. I created a multiple ring buffer zone of 5, 10, and 15 miles around my oil spill points to show what environments would be included in these buffer zones, and to show what areas would be affected. And I did that for all 4 points to see what environments would be included. So to do this, I created the multiple ring buffer. I selected what environments would be affected and would be included, selected them out, created another layer based on this, and then I included it with my buffer and network and oil spill point. And so you kind of get good layout of all the environments that could potentially be affected in a pretty short time if one of these pipelines were to break open or one of these platforms were to spill. But you're just based on these, my point, based on the pipeline that would pop open and an oil spill would happen. So these are the ESI areas that would be affected by each oil spill location, and I've got it for each of my 4 locations. So this is the first simple analysis that I did, just to kind of select them out. The next I went through and I wanted to do a spatial analysis of the of where there might be clustering of high susceptible areas to an oil spill. So I wanted to see, were there any areas that had a large clustering or hotspot effect of these highly sensitive areas. So I wanted to go through and do this clustering and locate these areas so that first responders could go to these clustering locations that are high susceptible and have a high susceptibility ranking. So to do this, I use the high-low clustering tool with the GEDIS ordered general G statistic, using the GEDIS or general G statistic. Sorry about that. And I did my analysis weight based on the ESI ranking attribute. So this tool, it measures the degree of clustering for both the high values and low values using this statistic. And this display I'm about to show in a second, the red areas show the environment locations that contain statistical high areas of clustering of sensitive environments, and the blue areas show environment locations that contain statistical low areas of clustering of low sensitivity environments. So red should be priority, blue not as high in priority. Ran it 5 times, once for each oil spill location and once for the full data set on the Texas Gulf Coast. So in my first location, this is the original ESI data that I selected out for the oil spill, the mock oil spill point. And this is a far northern point along the Gulf of Texas, or the coast of Texas. And this is Houston Ship Channel, basically, Galveston. And so when I did this clustering analysis, I discovered that this area had a statistically high clustering of sensitive areas for the affected environmental sustainability index locations. And then for location 2, again, ESI data. And this is once I ran my clustering tool. These areas had statistically high ESI ranking or sensitive ESI ranking data. Location 3, again, ESI data. Statistically high areas of sensitive environments, but as you can see here, a lot of blue. So these areas would be much less susceptible to an oil spill. These environments doesn't mean that these areas should not be responded to, but obviously if this was being given to a first response group or volunteers, who wanted to help out, would be a location that they would be sent to first. Is in Matagorda Bay. And then last location, Corpus Christi Bay, that we all can relate to. Again, ESI data, and then huge statistical clustering of sensitive areas along Mustang Island up towards Port A, all these marshes that are on the other side of the highway, and just very high clustering of sensitive data. And so, it's a very good statistical representation of clustering of sensitive areas to be used as focuses for the first responders. And so then I did the statistical, I used a tool to run the spatial analysis on the full data set, using the whole state of Texas as the data set instead of just the areas that had been pulled out based on the buffer zones. Not just using the buffer zones as a boundary, but using the whole data set as a boundary. And it was very interesting to see that some of these areas that I picked, these oil spill locations, are right next to statistically high areas of sensitivity, environmental sensitivity. So it kind of confirmed my original hypothesis that there's a lot of pipelines, but there's also a lot of really sensitive environments in that area. So it's just something you have to keep your eye on and stay focused on. The state of Texas could. So this is something I created. This is one of my outputs, kind of as to show what this data could realistically do. These maps could be created to show first responders, affected areas that would be most affected and impacted by the buildup of oil. It would allow this, and the clustering analysis would help them set priority on areas, sensitive areas, faster than areas that might be much more resilient to the buildup of oil. And so kind of giving them ancillary pictures to show what they could be looking at, what they could be dealing with if they were to show up at these locations. And so with that, some future work that I could do to kind of continue on this project is to add current data and wind data to these mock oil spill areas, and maybe even create a live mapping application online to once something like this happens. Add impact areas, map areas that are still impacted by past oil spills that have actually happened here in the Gulf of Mexico, also known as, for example, the Horizon spill in 2010 that happened out of Louisiana by BP, by British Petroleum. And then also maybe even add a network analysis using the roads to show first responders easiest and fastest ways to get to beach access points from their different locations. So as a conclusion, these GIS applications can be a great tool when displaying and portraying areas that need to be given priority in an emergency, especially with a event such as an oil spill. These are the sources that I've used. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my presentation, Professor Lucy. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope this has been a great semester. I very much enjoyed taking this class. It had a couple overlaps with the GIS3 course, but I feel like taking this course did a really good job of setting in stone some of those skills that we have learned throughout this class. And would just like to thank you for such a great semester, and I hope you enjoy my term paper and my article review that I'm turning in with this presentation. So thank you very much again, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you.